Steve Harvey broke down when a veteran begged for help, and what he did next left all in tears. In that pivotal moment, the laughter faded, and the weight of compassion filled the room. This isn't just a heartwarming story. It's a powerful testament to how one plea for help can spark an incredible movement. Michael, a veteran grappling with shadows from his past, sat in the audience, filled with anxiety. He came seeking hope, but would anyone truly listen? What happened next would not only change Michael's life, but also resonate deeply with everyone present. Prepare for an emotional journey that reveals how vulnerability can unite us all and ignite change. The auditorium buzzed with excitement as Steve Harvey took the stage, his charismatic presence immediately filling the room. Spotlights danced across his face as he delivered punchline after punchline, the crowd erupting in waves of laughter. This charity event was meant to bring joy, raise funds, and celebrate community spirit. And Steve was doing exactly that, his humor a perfect antidote to the stresses of everyday life. But in the sea of smiling faces, one man sat with a different energy. Michael Johnson, a 38-year-old veteran who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, wasn't there for the comedy. His hands trembled slightly as they gripped the armrests of his seat. The laughter around him felt distant, almost foreign, as if he were underwater, hearing the world through a thick barrier. Michael had rehearsed what he might say 100 times in his mind. For weeks, he'd heard about this charity event, how Steve Harvey often took time to hear from audience members. It had taken everything in him to purchase a ticket, to shower and dress presentably, to force himself out of the apartment where he'd been isolating for months. His therapist had encouraged him. Sometimes, reaching out is the bravest thing you can do. As the show progressed, Steve's voice shifted to a more serious tone. You know, folks, tonight isn't just about having a good time. It's about making a difference. Is there anyone here tonight who wants to share something with us? Something that matters? Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. This was his moment, perhaps his only chance. But what if his voice failed him? What if the crowd grew impatient with his stumbling words? What if Steve brushed him off with a joke to keep the mood light? Several hands shot up around the auditorium. Steve pointed to a woman in the front row who shared a heartwarming story about her daughter's recovery from illness. The audience applauded. Then a man spoke about his charity work. More applause. Michael's hand trembled as he slowly raised it. To his shock, Steve's eyes met his, and the host pointed directly at him. "Yes, sir, in the blue shirt. Stand up and tell us your name." The spotlight swung toward Michael, blinding him momentarily. His mouth went dry as he stood, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes on him. The microphone was past his way, and when he finally held it, it felt impossibly heavy. "My name is Michael Johnson," he began, his voice barely audible. He cleared his throat, forcing himself to speak louder. "I'm a veteran. I served in Afghanistan." A respectful murmur swept through the crowd. Steve nodded encouragingly, his expression softening. I need help," Michael continued, his voice cracking. The room fell eerily silent. The laughter from moments ago completely evaporated. "I came home 4 years ago, but I never really came back. The nightmares, the anxiety, the feeling that I don't belong anywhere anymore." He paused, fighting back tears, wondering if he should just sit down and disappear into the crowd. But something in Steve's attentive gaze gave him courage. "Every day is a battle," Michael continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "My brothers and sisters in arms, so many of us are fighting wars nobody sees. We were told to be strong, to move on, but some wounds don't heal with time." The audience was captivated now, leaning forward in their seats. Michael could feel the shift in the room, not pity, but genuine concern. "I lost my job last month, my marriage before that. I'm about to lose my apartment. But what scares me most is losing hope." His voice broke again, but he pushed through. "There are programs out there, but the waiting lists are long. The paperwork is overwhelming when you can barely get out of bed some days. I am not just speaking for myself, but for thousands of veterans who feel forgotten." As Michael spoke, faces in the audience began to change. Some wiped away tears, Others nodded in recognition, perhaps veterans themselves or family members who understood the struggle. "I didn't come here for handouts," Michael said, standing straighter now. "I came because I need to believe that people still care, that my service mattered, that I'm not invisible." The silence that followed his words was profound, not awkward or uncomfortable, but filled with the weight of truth. In that moment, Michael had done something extraordinary. He had transformed from a nameless face in the crowd to a human being with a story that demanded to be heard. Steve Harvey stood motionless at center stage, his usual animated expression replaced by something much deeper. The teleprompter continued to scroll with the planned program, but Steve wasn't looking at it anymore. His eyes remained fixed on Michael, who still stood, microphone in hand, vulnerable but somehow stronger than when he began. What Michael couldn't know was how deeply his words had resonated not just with the audience, but with Steve himself. The host had his own connections to military families, stories he rarely shared publicly. As the seconds ticked by, something profound was happening on that stage, something that would alter the course of the evening and beyond. As Michael finally sat down, his heart still racing but somehow lighter, he had no idea that his brave confession had just lit a fuse. The next few minutes would reveal a side of Steve Harvey that few had ever witnessed and would set in motion events that would change not only Michael's life, but the lives of countless veterans who had been suffering in silence. For several heartbeats, Steve Harvey stood in silence, the microphone loose in his hand. The audience waited, unsure what would happen next. This wasn't part of the script. This wasn't the comedy they had come for. But sometimes, the most powerful moments happen when the script is abandoned. Steve cleared his throat, but his voice still came out husky with emotion. "Thank you, Michael, for your honesty." He took a step forward, then another, moving closer to where Michael sat. "You know, we come to these events, we laugh, we have a good time, but sometimes we need to be reminded of what really matters." The cameras, which had been filming for his show, continued to roll. The producers in the control room exchanged glances, sensing something extraordinary unfolding. "I want to tell you something," Steve continued, his voice gaining strength. "My father was a coal miner. He wasn't a veteran, but he knew struggle. He knew what it meant to feel invisible." He paused, collecting himself. "And what I learned from him is that no one should have to fight their battles alone." Steve's usual animated expressions had vanished, replaced by a raw authenticity that captivated everyone present. "Michael, when you say you were losing hope, that hits me right here." He tapped his chest. "Because hope isn't just some nice idea. Hope is oxygen. Without it, we suffocate." The audience remained perfectly still, many wiping away tears, as Steve walked down from the stage and approached Michael directly. The camera operators scrambled to follow him, sensing this wasn't just good television, this was something real. "Stand up again, brother," Steve said softly, extending his hand. Michael rose shakily, and without hesitation, Steve embraced him. The audience erupted in applause, but Steve wasn't playing to them anymore. He spoke directly to Michael, though his microphone still carried his words to everyone. "You served our country, and now it's time we served you." Steve pulled back, keeping one hand firmly on Michael's shoulder. "I don't just want to say thank you for your service. Those words are important, but they were not enough. I want to do something about it." Steve turned to face the audience, his expression resolute. "How many of you in this room know a veteran who is struggling?" Hands rose throughout the auditorium. "How many of you have the means to help in some way, big or small?" More hands. "Here's what we were going to do," Steve announced, his voice taking on the decisive tone that had made him famous as a problem solver. "First, Michael, I am personally covering your rent for the next year." The audience cheered, but Steve raised his hand for quiet. "That's not charity, giving you breathing room to heal, to find your footing." Michael began to protest, but Steve gently cut him off. "This isn't just about you anymore. You had the courage to speak up, and now you've become a voice for thousands who are suffering silently." Steve turned back to the audience, his eyes scanning the room. "I am establishing a fund, Right here, right now. I am putting in the first $100,000. Gasps rippled through the crowd. This fund will cut through the red tape and get immediate help to veterans in crisis housing, mental health services, job placement. The production team was frantically adjusting, realizing the show had transformed into something entirely different. The teleprompter had long been abandoned. But money alone isn't enough, Steve continued, his voice rising with passion. We need action. We need commitment. He pointed to different sections of the audience. I see business owners here. I see healthcare professionals. I see people with influence and connections. Steve's eyes were now glistening with unshed tears, but his voice remained strong. I am asking you to join me, not tomorrow, not next week, today, right now. In that moment, something electric moved through the room, a collective recognition that they were witnessing not just a charitable gesture, but the birth of a movement. Michael, Steve said, turning back to the veteran who stood stunned beside him, you came here looking for help, but what you've really done is help all of us. You've reminded us of our responsibility to each other. The cameras caught it, all the tears now flowing freely down Steve's face. The transformation in Michael's expression from despair to disbelief to the first fragile blooming of hope, and the audience rising to their feet in a standing ovation that wasn't about entertainment anymore, but about solidarity. What had begun as a routine charity event had become something profound, a moment of genuine human connection that would soon ripple far beyond the walls of that auditorium. The following morning, clips of Steve Harvey's emotional encounter with Michael spread across social media like wildfire. What had been a private moment of connection between a celebrity and a struggling veteran became a national conversation. The hashtag #StandWithMichael began trending, and soon, news outlets were picking up the story. This wasn't planned, Steve explained on his morning radio show, his voice still carrying the weight of the previous night's emotions. But sometimes God puts you in a position where you can look away. You can just offer words. You have to act. The fund that Steve had spontaneously created had already grown exponentially overnight. Corporations called in with matching pledges. Celebrities tweeted their support and contributions. But perhaps most moving were the thousands of small donations pouring in from ordinary Americans, $520, of gratitude to veterans. Michael, meanwhile, was overwhelmed by the attention. A man who had been invisible just days before was now fielding interview requests from major networks. His phone hadn't stopped ringing. I never wanted to be the face of anything, he told a reporter from his modest apartment, where a past due notice still hung on the refrigerator. I just reached a breaking point. I never imagined Steve Harvey would respond that way. But as unexpected as the attention was, Michael recognized the opportunity it presented. With Steve's team helping him navigate the sudden publicity, he began using his platform to speak about specific challenges facing veterans, the labyrinthine VA system, the stigma surrounding mental health, the difficulty transitioning to civilian employment. It's not just about me anymore, Michael said, echoing Steve's words from that fateful night. It's about all the veterans who don't have a microphone in front of them. 3 weeks after the initial encounter, Steve invited Michael back to his show, this time as an honored guest, rather than an anonymous audience member. The studio was packed with veterans and their families, many of whom had already received assistance from the newly established Harvey Veterans Initiative. As Michael walked onto the set, the audience rose in a standing ovation. He stood straighter now, his gaze more direct, though the humility that had touched so many remained evident in his slight nod of acknowledgement. Michael, Steve said, embracing him warmly. Do you have any idea what you started? Michael shook his head, visibly moved by the reception. Let me show you, Steve replied, gesturing toward a screen. The lights dimmed, and a video began to play, a montage of actions taken since that night. Veterans receiving keys to new apartments. A team of volunteer therapists offering free counseling sessions. Corporate partners announcing job training programs specifically designed for veterans. Community centers opening their doors for support group meetings. But most powerful were the faces dozens of veterans looking directly into the camera, each sharing how the initiative had impacted them. "I got my first good night's sleep in 3 years," said one woman, her service medals visible on the shelf behind her. "Someone finally listened," said another veteran, his voice breaking. "Really listened." When the lights came back up, there wasn't a dry eye in the studio. Steve turned to Michael, who sat stunned by what he had just witnessed. "You did this," Steve said simply. "Your courage that night opened doors that had been closed for too long." Michael shook his head. "No, you did this. You could have just offered kind words and moved on with your show." "That's where you were wrong," Steve replied, his voice carrying that rare combination of humor and profound sincerity that had made him beloved by millions. "All I did was respond the way any decent human being should. The problem is, we've set the bar too low. We've made it okay to just say thank you for your service and walk away," the audience murmured in agreement. "But here's the beautiful thing," Steve continued, addressing not just Michael now, but everyone watching. "Once one person steps up, it gives others permission to do the same. That's the ripple effect. That's how real change happens." As if on cue, the studio doors opened, and a group of business leaders walked in, CEOs from major corporations, heads of healthcare systems, real estate developers. One by one, they approached the stage, each announcing specific commitments: jobs, housing, healthcare, education. This wasn't charity. This wasn't a one-time emotional response. This was systematic change being born from a moment of genuine human connection. As the commitments continued to pour in, Michael leaned over to Steve during a break and whispered, "I came to your show that night ready to give up. I never imagined it would lead to this." Steve nodded, his eyes reflecting both joy and determination. "That's the thing about hope, Michael. Sometimes it finds you in the most unexpected places, and once it does, it spreads faster than you could ever imagine." The cameras caught the moment, not staged, not scripted, just realists. Michael smiled for what felt like the first time in years. It wasn't the end of his struggles, or those of countless other veterans, but it was something perhaps even more important: a new beginning. As the weeks rolled on, the momentum generated by Steve Harvey's initiative showed no signs of slowing down. The Harvey Veterans Initiative had officially launched, supported by a coalition of businesses, nonprofits, and everyday citizens. Michael Johnson found himself at the forefront of this movement, a reluctant leader but one with a powerful story to share. Michael's phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages. He had become a sought-after speaker at events, sharing his journey from isolation to empowerment. Each time he spoke, he recounted the night he stood in front of Steve Harvey in the audience, revealing the struggles that so many veterans faced. With each engagement, the message resonated further. Michael spoke passionately about the need for mental health resources, job training programs, and community support. He shared his experience navigating the VA system, emphasizing the critical need for reform to make it more accessible and efficient. One afternoon, Michael was invited to give a talk at a local high school. As he stood in front of a group of teenagers, he felt a wave of nerves wash over him. Would they care? Would they understand? But as he began to share his story, he saw their faces shift from indifference to engagement. He explained the realities of life after service, the struggles with PTSD, and the importance of recognizing the sacrifices of veterans. By the end of his talk, he could see that he had made an impact. Many students approached him afterward, eager to learn more and share their thoughts. A few weeks later, a student from that high school reached out through social media. She had organized a fundraiser to support the initiative, rallying her classmates and community to contribute. Inspired by Michael's story, they had raised a significant amount of money, enough to provide scholarships for veterans seeking education and training. "Michael, you're inspiring a new generation," Steve told him during a follow-up interview. "This is what change looks like. It's not just about the funds we raise, it's about the awareness we create." The initiative continued to expand, reaching beyond their local community. Michael began traveling to different states, sharing the message and encouraging others to take action in their own communities. He realized that the fight for veterans' rights was not just a personal battle. It was a collective responsibility. One day, while preparing for a speaking engagement in Chicago, Michael received an unexpected phone call. It was from a producer at a major television network. They were interested in creating a documentary series highlighting veterans and their stories, featuring the work of the Harvey Veterans Initiative. Excitement and nervousness bubbled within him. This could amplify our message to millions, he thought. He agreed to meet with the producers to discuss the vision for the series. When the meeting day arrived, Michael walked into the conference room, where a group of producers and directors were gathered. They presented their concept, a series that would not only showcase the challenges veterans faced, but also highlight the incredible work being done to support them. What we want to do is create a platform where veterans can share their stories, get the help they need, and inspire others, the lead producer explained. We believe your story, Michael, can be the heart of this series. Michael felt overwhelmed by the opportunity. I'm just one person, he said, his voice filled with uncertainty. There are so many others who deserve the spotlight too. That's exactly why we want you involved, the producer replied. You've shown that one voice can spark change. Imagine what we can do together. After much consideration, Michael decided to take the plunge. The documentary series, titled Voices of Valor, was officially greenlit, and Michael was set to be a central figure. The goal was to document not only the struggles but also the resilience of veterans across the nation. As filming began, Michael found himself in front of the camera often, sharing his experiences and hearing from others who had faced similar challenges. The stories poured in veterans who had overcome addiction, found love after loss, and rebuilt their lives. Each narrative was unique, but a common thread of hope and perseverance wove through them all. The series quickly gained traction, attracting attention from media outlets and advocacy groups. Michael received messages from veterans who had watched the episodes and found the courage to seek help for their own struggles. Lives were being changed, and the ripple effect Steve had spoken of was becoming a tidal wave. One evening, after a long day of filming, Michael sat quietly in his apartment, reflecting on how far he had come. He thought of the nights spent alone, the overwhelming despair that had once consumed him. Now, he was part of something larger, a movement that was actively changing lives. He picked up his phone and texted Steve, who had become not just a mentor but a close friend. "Thank you for believing in me," he wrote. "I never imagined I could make such a difference." A few moments later, Steve replied, "You did this, Michael. You took the first step, and now so many are following your lead. Keep shining that light." With renewed energy, Michael knew that this was just the beginning. The fight for veterans' rights was far from over, but he was no longer alone. Together, they would continue to advocate, inspire, and create change. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Hope had become a powerful force, and they were just getting started. As Voices of Valor gained popularity, Michael found himself in the spotlight more than ever before. With each episode, he was reminded of the stories that needed to be told, the veterans whose voices had been silenced by stigma and struggle. However, with increased visibility came challenges he had never anticipated. One evening, during a live Q&A session following a screening of the documentary, Michael faced an unexpected question from a viewer. "Michael, what do you say to those who think veterans should just get over it and move on? How do you respond to the stigma around mental health?" The question hit hard. He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I say that it's easy to dismiss what you don't understand," he began, looking directly into the camera. "But every veteran's experience is unique. We don't just serve our country, we carry our experiences with us. For some, those experiences are traumatic, and healing isn't linear. It takes time, support, and understanding." The audience, both in person and online, nodded in agreement. He could feel the weight of the question, and he knew it was a sentiment that resonated widely. It's okay to not be okay. We need to normalize that conversation, to let veterans know they're not alone in their struggles. After the Q&A, Michael received a flood of messages, many expressing gratitude for his honesty. But he also faced criticism. Some online commenters dismissed his experiences as excuses, perpetuating the very stigma he aimed to combat. He felt a wave of frustration wash over him, but he was determined not to let it deter him. In the following weeks, Michael and the production team decided to address this stigma directly in the series. They planned an episode focused specifically on mental health, featuring mental health professionals, veterans, and their families. They aimed to provide education and resources, breaking down misconceptions and fostering conversations about healing. As filming for the mental health episode commenced, Michael spent time interviewing veterans who had sought help. He listened to stories of resilience, of those who had faced similar scrutiny and emerged stronger. Each narrative was a reminder that healing was possible, no matter the obstacles. During one interview, a former soldier named Lisa shared her journey. "I was hesitant to ask for help," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I thought it made me weak, but I realized that reaching out was the bravest thing I could do. It saved my life." Michael nodded, understanding her struggle. "What would you tell someone who feels the same way you did?" he asked. "I tell them that vulnerability is strength," she replied, her eyes shining with conviction. "It's okay to ask for help. It doesn't make you any less of a warrior." The episode took shape beautifully, blending personal stories with expert insights. Each segment aimed to educate viewers on the importance of mental health support for veterans, highlighting available resources and encouraging open dialogue. Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing they were tackling a crucial issue head-on. As the premiere date approached, anticipation built among the veterans community. Michael organized a special screening event, inviting local veterans, mental health advocates, and community leaders. He hoped this episode would spark conversations that could lead to real change. On the night of the screening, the atmosphere was electric. Veterans filled the room, sharing stories and laughter, but also a palpable sense of camaraderie. As the episode played, the reactions were powerful. Many cried, some nodded in recognition, and all seemed deeply moved by the honesty shared on screen. After the screening, Michael took the stage, heart racing. "Tonight, we've shown that vulnerability is not weakness. It's an invitation for others to join us in our journey. Let's continue to support one another and break the stigma surrounding mental health." The audience erupted in applause, and Michael felt a surge of hope. This was what he had fought for: a community that understood, supported, and uplifted one another. In the days following the episode's release, the impact was undeniable. Social media buzzed with discussions about mental health, and veterans reached out to share their experiences and seek help. Local clinics reported an increase in veterans seeking therapy and support services, a tangible sign that the conversation was shifting. But with success came new challenges. Michael was invited to speak at national conferences and panels, and the pressure to represent veterans felt heavier than ever. He worried about the expectations placed on him as a figurehead. One night, feeling overwhelmed, Michael called Steve. "I don't know if I can keep this up," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if I say the wrong thing? What if I don't live up to what people expect?" "Michael," Steve replied, his voice steady and reassuring, "you're doing exactly what you need to be doing. You're sharing your truth, and that's more powerful than any expectation. Remember, you're not just a representative, you're a human being. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to not have all the answers." Michael took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. "Thank you, Steve. I needed to hear that." "Just keep being you," Steve encouraged. "That's what makes your message so powerful." Authenticity resonates more than perfection. With renewed determination, Michael embraced the challenges ahead. He understood that the road to change wouldn't be easy, but he was committed to walking it alongside his fellow veterans. Together, they would continue to break down barriers, fostering a culture of understanding and support. As he prepared for his next speaking engagement, Michael felt a sense of purpose ignite within him. The journey was far from over, but with each step, he knew they were moving closer to a world where veterans could find hope, healing, and a sense of belonging.